I started thinking about it at least 30 years ago when I was trying to understand the relationships between technology and society in a broad way. But at the time, it was the so-called microelectronics revolution, or information revolution, as it came to be called after that. And I got really interested, especially in the hype, really, the things that were being said about the information revolution that was going to be so marvelous and world-changing, and life was going to be better, and our lives would be easier. And I thought to myself, nothing like this has really happened in human history. Is it likely to happen now? And so I started looking critically at the idea of information society and realized there were also people looking at it quite negatively. And out of that, I started thinking, wow, the ways in which our personal data are treated is changing and appears to be going to change whatever happens. And so I started thinking about surveillance in a broad way. Surveillance as well, both the operations and the experiences of personal data gathering and its analysis and so on for some purpose, whether for management or influence or entitlement, whatever that is. So, that's the way that I'm thinking of surveillance. So what I really enjoy is kind of the interaction and the movement of knowledge between me and graduate students. I mean, it's true of a classroom teaching situation as well, because I learn from undergrads as well, but particularly graduate students, their growing realization that the kinds of things that we're looking at really have a tremendous impact on the world, that they're much bigger perhaps than they had originally considered. We think of surveillance frequently as being something relatively narrow that police or intelligence agencies do. But when you think about the ways that Facebook or Google do surveillance, or the ways that people surveil each other, it becomes very complex and very much to do with everyday life. So their growing realization that part of their everyday life really does need to be scrutinized in a scholarly and intellectual way. But at the same time, as they start to think about those things and they start to work on these things, then I learn things from them, which I work into my own learning and teaching. So it's that two-way process that I find is just so stimulating and so exciting. Okay, let me talk about a couple of different things. I direct a research center, the Surveillance Studies Center, and we currently are involved in a very large scale project over 5 or 6 years, which is multidisciplinary, and it's also international, but based in Canada. And I also have researchers in the team from coast to coast. And this one is focused on what's called big data, and our project is simply called Big Data Surveillance. So what difference does it make to have these new kinds of data analytics being applied in all kinds of areas, from healthcare through marketing to policing, national security, and so on and so forth? And so that is a tremendously interesting and exciting project, and one that touches, again, on so much that is going on in the real world. So it really grapples with issues that people are obliged to face. So that's the large-scale project that I am directing, and in which I work with graduate students and so on. But I'm also working on a personal project, which is a book I've been working on for years now, too long, called The Culture of Surveillance. And here I'm trying to distinguish the culture of surveillance. It's partly to do with that definition that I use, the experience of surveillance as well as how it operates. And I'm trying to understand it as distinct from, but not separate from, like the surveillance state or surveillance society. What I'm trying to suggest is that we need to understand how people respond to surveillance, negotiate with surveillance, uh, and actually initiate surveillance themselves on every level. I mean, this is something that has, again, become very much part of our lives. We've become so familiarized to all sorts of surveillance that, in a sense, we end up, I think, often normalizing surveillance. If face recognition technology is okay on Facebook, hey, then why isn't it okay in airports? You see what I mean? There's a kind of possibility of a normalization effect, and that's what I'm exploring. And so I'm looking at the ways that people imagine, the imaginaries of surveillance, and also the practices, the things that people actually do, like when they're going through an airport security, or when they're online, or in so many contexts, how we negotiate with the fact that our data are no longer just ours. They're circulating and flowing. How do we live in that world? And so what I'm suggesting, subtitle of the book will probably be Watching as a Way of Life. This is something that has become so broad and generalized that I'm trying to explore it in that context. So that's my own personal project at the moment. One always hopes as an academic that your work will actually make a difference. And I've always believed that it's possible that it does, and that it's something that as academics we should aim at. Because what's the point of amassing knowledge or learning about things if we don't share it, and if there aren't ways that we can share it? So, obviously I write. I mean, that's one of the key ways, and one hopes that one's writing is going to make a difference. And I'm aware of many people in many countries who've read my work and who read it in different languages and so on. So that's one thing. I think working with graduate students makes a difference too, because they in turn can have similar kind of impacts through their work. But I'm also very keen to work with others who are concerned about questions of privacy and civil liberties, with human rights relating to personal data. And so, for example, in our large-scale project that we're working on at the moment, we have partners, official partners, who are legitimate parts of the research team, not just sort of readers of our findings or general supporters. They're actually involved in the research. So the Federal Privacy Commission in Canada, the BC Privacy Commission in Victoria, the British Columbia Civil Liberties Association, and the International Civil Liberties Monitoring Group. Plus, we have good connections with other privacy commissions and also with groups like Open Media. So we work with partners, and because they're helping to direct the research that we do, we're in touch indirectly with those people, for example, who actually take their complaints or their worries and concerns to a privacy commissioner, or who express their feelings about some change in legal standards or whatever to one of the civil liberties groups. So it makes an impact there. And then thirdly, I suppose, I get to speak at various places. And if you get invited to speak, not just in university and conference contexts, but 2 or 3 years ago, I was speaking at the Japanese Diet, which is one of the houses of parliament in Japan. Last year, I was speaking at the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. So one gets opportunity as well to speak on a platform that allows a wide range of people to hear what you have to say. And so I hope that in those kinds of ways, which are all very related to my academic role, one can actually make a difference. And that is what I aspire to do.